Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to what has become the usual Saturday news roundup. Now, I was actually going to save this first story in today's video for one of the Back on Track episodes, but honestly, it got me a bit too excited yesterday when I read it, so I just had to include it. And that is the news that Chase Carey has confirmed that F1 is considering the possibility of holding races at circuits that were not on the original 2020 calendar. As I've covered in previous videos, Imola and Hockenheim have both already thrown their hats into the ring and said that they would be willing to host a race if the sport needed them to, and if it was financially viable for them to do so. With so many races being either postponed or cancelled, F1 bosses are trying to put together a new calendar that could see as many as 18 races run between July and the end of this year. However, with the situation evolving constantly, or the fluid situation as they like to call it, trying to get that calendar sorted is going to be a tall order, and as a result, Carey has admitted that the sport is considering all of its options. We've been working since Australia and we are actively engaged with our promoters in putting together a race calendar. We have two primary challenges: identifying locations where we can hold the race and determining how we transport all necessary parties and their equipment to that location. We are in discussions with all of our promoters as well as some tracks that are not currently on our 2020 calendar to make sure we explore all options. Now, over the last few weeks, there have been a lot of reports and hints from Ross Brawn that we could see two races held at circuits such as the Red Bull Ring and possibly Silverstone, and Carey has now, I suppose, officially confirmed that racing across 2 weekends in Austria is likely in order to help them fill up some slots on any revised calendar. Our goal is to launch the season on the weekend of July 4th to 5th in Austria, and it is likely that we race the weekend of July 11th to 12th in Austria as well. We are in the advanced stages of putting together a schedule of additional European races through early September, including races during the traditional August break. We plan to race in Eurasia, Asia, the Americas in September, October, November, before finishing in the Gulf in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi in December. On top of all of that, Carey said that the idea of the season running into 2021 if it cannot be completed by the end of December is not something they are currently planning for, with a provisional season end date of December 13th reportedly penciled in. He did add though that although the priority is to finish by mid-December, they would consider running the season into January if they had no other option. As ever, a fair bit of information there from Chase Carey. As I said earlier this week, actually, I have been impressed with how well they've been handling things since Australia, and also how relatively open they have been with fans about their plans for 2020. And I'm quite excited at the idea of the season including some tracks that weren't on the original calendar for this year. I've already said it, but I would love to see them race at the likes of Hockenheim and Imola, but also places like Jerez and Estoril would be great too. And what about the Nürburgring? The Bundesliga in Germany is set to restart later this month, so why not have two races at two different tracks there? I've said this many times before on live streams, but the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit is one of my all-time favourites, and it's a track that often gives us really good racing, and logistically it could work well. Now obviously there are the usual hurdles to overcome with money and all of that, but it's a track I'd absolutely love to see back. And there are so many other tracks in Europe that would be fairly easy to get to, again from a logistical point of view, just while the season gets up and running. And once the flyaways start, that opens up even more possibilities, and if we can get Sepang back, I'd be a very happy guy. I guess then this is the question for this week. Which tracks would you like to see host a Grand Prix that weren't originally on the 2020 F1 calendar? You can, as ever, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Right then, that's the main story done, so let's move on. And I'm afraid it's not great news for the financial side of Formula One. The Formula One group has reported a drop in revenue of 84% for the first quarter of 2020. With no racing currently taking place, the sport's income fell to $36 million. That sounds like a lot of money, but that is a huge drop when compared to the $246 million they raked in during the same period in 2019. The report shows that the primary revenue, which comes from things like race revenues and sponsorships, brought in just $13 million versus the $198 million from the first quarter of last year. The report included a statement which essentially went over everything there, but also added, "We currently expect no races to take place in the second quarter of 2020. That would take them to the end of June, which confirms what we pretty much already knew, which is of course that the 2020 season won't be starting any time before July. So the sports has taken quite a hit when it comes to money, actually a huge hit to be fair. And do you know, I don't think that's going to come as any surprise to anybody. Ultimately, if the sport isn't racing, it's not going to be making any money, hence also why some teams are starting to struggle. I do want to just throw something in at this point though. I see a lot of comments on videos and over on social media expressing doubt over whether or not we will see racing this year. And yeah, I think it's reasonable to have those doubts. We just don't know what's going to happen over the next few days, weeks and months. However, one comment I see a lot is, why don't they just cancel this season and focus on 2021? Well, frankly, this story answers that for you. They've already suffered an 84% drop in revenue, and we're only just into May. So if they don't race this year, their income will continue to fall, and so there is a real possibility that we could lose teams, and even that there may not be a sport to go racing in 2021. That may sound a little bit over the top to some, but ultimately, if the money isn't there, the racing can't and won't happen. So if you want to know why they won't just cancel F1 in 2020 now and focus on 2021, the simple answer is they just can't afford to. Next up, Lando Norris believes that McLaren's impending switch to Mercedes power next year is just one of many improvements the team need to make if they are to compete once again at the very sharp end of the grid. As I'm sure many of you will remember, McLaren ran with Mercedes power until the end of the 2014 season before switching to Honda in 2015, a switch that went really well, and they eventually ditched the Japanese manufacturer, changed their minds and started using Renault power from 2018. Now, the move back to Mercedes has seen many people get excited at the prospect of McLaren potentially being able to propel themselves to the front of the grid again, but when asked about the new power units, Norris urged a little bit of caution. It's what we believe will be an addition and something to help us step forward, but it's not going to be everything. There's a lot of time that we still need to find in the chassis itself and not just rely on the engine. It's a step forward, but there's a lot of things in Formula 1 that are part of making a car go quickly, and this is just one of hundreds of thousands. It's good, it's something we look forward to, something we definitely think is going to be helping us. We have to get this season out of the way and work as hard as we can for now and then look forward to it next year. I think those are some smart words from Norris, who also said that getting back into an F1 car after so long away will actually be quite tough on the drivers physically, but he can't wait to go racing again, and I think most of us will echo that sentiment. I know health and safety and all of that has got to be priority, but my God, do I miss my Formula 1 on a Sunday. But yeah, having Mercedes power should definitely help them. I suppose, if nothing else, they know they don't need to worry about that side of things. It's quick and it's reliable, that's everything they need. I am intrigued though to see how things go next year with the current chassis being freezed for 2021. I know the FIA have said that McLaren can make changes that are essential in order to make the power unit fit, but I do wonder if they might find themselves at a bit of a disadvantage early doors compared to the likes of, say, Racing Point or Aston Martin as they will be then. You know, a team whose car is built around the Mercedes power unit rather than built around another power unit and then having to chop and change things to fit something else in. I don't know, it might go very, very smoothly and there are no problems whatsoever. But it is just a thought and something to keep an eye on next year. And finally, Daniil Kvyat has revealed that he almost walked away from racing after he was dropped from the Red Bull program towards the end of 2017. Many of you will already know this, but if you're a newer fan, a little bit of a quick history lesson. Back in 2014, the Russian landed a seat at Toro Rosso before being promoted to Red Bull in 2015 to fill the seat vacated by Sebastian Vettel, who of course moved to Ferrari. In that season, he managed to beat teammate Daniel Ricciardo, but after completing just 4 races of the 2016 season, he was demoted back down to Toro Rosso, with Max Verstappen taking his place at Red Bull. The Russian stayed there until the Malaysian Grand Prix in 2017, where he was dropped again in favour of Pierre Gasly this time. Kvyat did return for the US Grand Prix, where he scored the team's last point of the season before being dumped from the team and the driver programme completely. At the time, I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking this, but it did look as though his career was over. But the Russian was snapped up by Ferrari as a test driver for the 2018 season, a move which he says gave him the confidence boost he needed to carry on racing. I tested that year's car and that was very emotional for me because first of all, it's a Ferrari, it was really cool. I hadn't driven anything for 6 months or something, I was enjoying it so much, and that day I understood I wanted to come back at any cost to Formula 1. I felt I had a lot of unfinished business in Formula 1. There were talks in different areas, but I always wanted to drive in Formula 1. I was considering stopping completely if I didn't get a deal again. Kvyat also spoke about working with Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen, explaining how he would help them by watching onboard footage of them on track and pinpointing some of the things they could do differently to find some time. You can, by the way, listen to that interview in full on F1's Beyond the Grid podcast, which I will, of course, link below. Honestly, though, I am so glad Kvyat didn't walk away. I've always liked that guy, and after he was dropped, I consistently maintained that he was far better than many people were giving him credit for. And do you know what? He proved that, didn't he, when he returned to Toro Rosso last year and even managed to get that podium in Germany, which I always like to think is kind of the ultimate middle finger to Helmut Marko. If I'm being totally honest about his future, I still think he is just there until the next young prospect comes through, and then, unfortunately, he will probably get dropped again. But I really hope that he can do enough whilst racing for what is now AlphaTauri to show the rest of the grid what he can do and pick up a seat elsewhere. I still, by the way, really do think he'd be a very good option for Haas going forward. But anyway, that is it for this week's news roundup. Don't forget to let me know which circuits you'd like to see host a race this year that weren't on the original 2020 calendar. And you can also let me know your thoughts on any of the stories featured today down in the comment section. Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, including some non-news stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to turn into some kind of newsreader person or anything like that. I just had a lot of stuff to catch up on after that 2 weeks with no content back in April. And don't forget, you can of course follow me over on social media with all of the links you need for that in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching and I will catch you again in the next one. Bye bye.